Hello again, I am Blunty, and if you know your retro gaming stuff, you will know what this is. It is an Atari 2600. It, like me, is about 40 years old, and this is how I got into gaming in the first place as a very young lad.
But in a world filled with tasty technology, this is no ordinary Atari 2600.
This is the world's most powerful Atari 2600. It does this. Which, to be fair, it's supposed to do, because that is an Atari 2600 game, but this also does this. Which this, and I've just realized it's a green circuit board, so it's probably playing havoc with the green screen I'm using, but this does that, which this, the brain of the Atari 2600, could only dream about in some sort of sweat-soaked fever dream inspired by very powerful hallucinogenic psychoactive drugs, dreaming of the future of video games. But now this, it's got a new brain. I gave it a new brain. I have woven within the 40-year-old plastic of this ancient technology much more powerful technomancy, making it capable of providing gaming sensations. 3 decades worth of gaming sensations. A little over, actually. So let's have a chat about it. Now, this is a project I've been wanting to do for many, many years now. As I said in the intro, this is how my gaming adventure began as a wee lad. And I've wanted for many, many years now to build a emulation machine to do so in an original Atari 2600. Not just any Atari 2600, rather. It had to be the Vega one, the one with the black on it. The one with the wood panel on it, and the one with 6 switches up instead of the 4. They call those the heavy 6s or the woodies. Had to be the Vega, because that's the one I had. And getting a hold of one of these was the trick. Finding one that was non-functional, so I didn't rip apart a fully functional and perfectly working Atari 2600, and there are many about. These things are basically bulletproof. But finding one that was non-functional and in good cosmetic condition, because the looks are the only important thing. The external looks are what's important if I'm going to rip out the guts and replace them. So, non-functional, great looking from the outside, and at a price that didn't make me go, what? This is also the first properly, truly custom case I've done in years. I've built a bunch of PCs, many of which I've done videos or live streams about. And if you're interested in the live streams, twitch.tv/BluntNate. Sorry, going to throw in a bit of cross promotion there. Just trying to pump the accelerator on the Twitch channel again. I've started to fall anyway. But it's been a long time since I've done a properly custom case, and most of the PCs I've built recently are fairly good looking and flashy, just with a little RGB and nice case and stuff like this. This is the first properly custom case I've done in many years, which means the Dremel came out. Well, my Dremel clone, because I cheaped out and bought a, I don't even know what the brand is. It's not Dremel though. Hand tool. Zzz. Point is, this project is a work of personal passion and one I've waited quite some time to smack into reality, so I'm very enthusiastic and excited to finally have it in hand, and it works so well. And a few months back, where one of my sort of semi-yearly trips to eBay looking for one of these things finally came to fruition, I found a good cosmetic condition, non-working Vega 4-switcher. So I clicked buy, and the plan started. And it was a perfect storm, really, because it's only now that this thing could have truly been at its perfect best, exactly what I wanted it to be, because the other side of the perfect storm was what AMD released late last year, the Ryzen 3 2200G, which is Ryzen 3 CPU, but with a Vega graphics chipset smacked inside it. It's a Vega 8, which is called that because it's got 8 compute units from the Vega architecture. And it's only this that allowed me to do the Atari 26 million, I think I'm going to call it. I haven't come up with a name. We'll talk about that at the end of the video, I think. I might need your help with the name. I'm calling it the Atari 26 million for now. The Atari 26 because it's a million times more powerful. I haven't done the math, but it seems that way. Where was I? Oh, right, the Ryzen 3 2200G. It is a surprisingly capable bit of kit. The graphics processor on board, the Vega 8, is about as powerful It's in the ballpark of a GT 1030, or on the AMD side of things, the RX 550, so it's not spectacular, but this is the first all-in-one, this is the first APU, CPU-GPU combination that has the power to do the entirety of what I wanted this project to do. And by the way, this isn't an AMD sponsored video. I know I'm saying AMD Ryzen 3 2200 quite a lot, but that's because I bought it and I was very impressed with it, so I'm telling you how excited I am about it. But this is also the first PC build I've done in a long time that I've bought all the components myself. There is no sponsored parts in here. There is no review parts in here. There's not even any parts I've got left over from older reviews. This is completely out of pocket because it is a work of personal passion. In the video details, you find two separate shopping lists, one of which for the parts that I used here, and we'll talk about those parts more in a minute, minus the cost of whatever it costs you to obtain your own Atari 2600, preferably non-working, because it's got sort of sociopath would tear apart a perfectly working Atari 2600 just to make a PC case mod out of it. The other shopping list, let me put that down, that's surprisingly heavy. It's packed with stuff. The other shopping list is basically the same components, but with a few things switched out, so you could build it yourself without needing to find an Atari. Just it's a regular PC case, a regular mini ITX case that comes with a power supply, which is why the second unit is cheaper than that. $440-ish for what I built there, about $410 for the second shopping list, because the power supply for the Atari version is a very specialized power supply, and that costs more than the case and power supply together on the other shopping list. But they're in the down below if you're curious about that, or once you watch this video, you want to build one of your own, because I think you might. Now, as I was talking about before, when I first had this idea for it, it required basically a motherboard and a discrete GPU, because like I said, there was no APU unit with enough grunt to do what I wanted it to be able to do. So the original plan, years ago when I first had the thought, was motherboard, GPU side by side, much like you see in a lot of mini ITX home theater PC style cases and things like that. I figured I could just get away with it maybe if I got a very small graphics card, but then cooling would be a problem. I'd have to get an external power supply, and that was getting enough air through the GPU and the external power supply. It wasn't as elegant as I wanted it to be. So I held off and I held off and I held off, and now we've got the Ryzen 3 2200. And as it turns out, an ITX motherboard will sit right next to a one unit server stack, not stack, server rack. Rack is the word I'm looking for. Server rack power supply will sit next to each other inside an Atari, as long as you carve out bits of plastic that are in the way. Have you ever tried to cut through 40-year-old plastic? Whew. Delicate process. But yeah, if it turns out they will fit just and I mean just enough room in there, as long as you put the motherboard on a bit of a kilter and get sort of very low profile RAM and a very, very low profile cooler. And we'll talk more about that in a second too, because that's a whole other story. In fact, you know what? Let's do it now. Let's do the hardware breakdown now. Let me talk you through what I built this from. So the AMD Ryzen 3 2200G processor with Radeon Vega 8 graphics for a tidy $95, by the way, which is the other part of this. It's incredibly good value for the performance you get from this thing. It's amazing. AMD are just kicking it. I snapped up an Auros B450 Pro Wi-Fi mini ITX motherboard from Gigabyte for $120, and I like Gigabyte motherboards, have great success with them, and this particular motherboard brings a good amount of onboard connectivity, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, plenty USB ports right on board, so I don't have to worry about trying to mount the front panel USBs into the front panel of the Atari 2600 just so I have room to plug stuff in. And unusually for a board in this family and at this price point, it has two HDMI outs and a display port, so I've got lots of output options. Point is, more flexibility is better than less flexibility, so it was the right price, had the great connectivity, I/O on the back, so job done. For the CPU cooler, the original plan was to go with the Noctua LH9A, where's the thing? NH-L9A. What's up with your names, Noctua? I can't hold them in my head, just fizzles. But it has a great reputation for being very efficient, very quiet, a great performer for these kind of low-profile coolers. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite low-profile enough. I kind of eyeballed it when I bought it and thought, yeah, that's 37 millimeters. That's about that much. I could probably get away with that. But as I mentioned before, then I had to tilt the motherboard, so I sort of ran out of headroom there. So, backup plan. I had to go for the Thermaltake Engine 17 1U, an ultra low profile cooler that I've actually been wanting to try for a while. When they brought it out a year or two ago, I think I first saw it. There's nothing quite like it on the market. The fan itself is a heatsink. It's a big metal fan within a sort of circular. I mean, I'm showing you a picture of it, surely. don't have to describe it for you, but it's very, very unusual, but it also makes it very, very low profile. Unfortunately for me, Thermaltake do not make one of these in the AM4 mount, which is what I'm using, obviously, because I'm using an AMD processor. So I bought an Intel one and did a little MacGyver work. You might have spotted it in some of the pictures I've been showing you already, with some cable ties to hold it into place, and it actually works really well. It doesn't wiggle around. It's making good solid thermal contact, and I've proven that with the the benchmarks and tests I've done and things like that. It works. It holds the temperature. I mean, it is a very, very low profile, very small, very low thermal mass CPU cooler, but it is also just a Ryzen 3. Memory-wise, just a nice basic Crucial 8GB kit for $57, which, much like the story with the cooler, ended up being plan B, because it turns out the RAM I had on the shelf on hand, some lovely HyperX stuff, their heat spreader was just too tall. And even the Crucial stuff, even that, I had to carve out some of the inside of the case just so I could get the case straight onto it, because that tilt the motherboard had to go on really boned me over on that one. But for the Crucial, about $57 worth, 2 sticks of 4, 8 gigs in total, and it works fine. When it comes to storage, obviously a traditional hard drive or even a 2.5-inch SSD or something like that was kind of out of the question if I'm looking to spare some space. Fortunately for us, pretty much every motherboard on the market at the moment, in fact, I think every motherboard on the market at the moment has an M.2 slot, at least one M.2 slot, which means you can mount a drive of very significant capacity, of very significant speed, right on the motherboard. Doesn't take it any extra room at all. And in the case of this motherboard, it goes underneath a nice big chunky heat spreader as well, which is good because heat's a bit of an issue in this tiny case with hardly any room to breathe. So I snatched up one of my trusty go-tos, a WD Green M.2 SSD, 256GB capacity, which is plenty for a bunch of classic games, which are much smaller than today's games, if you hadn't noticed, and also Windows install, of course, and any other software they need to support with it. And it only costs like $42, which is, I mean, think about 250GB worth of SSD, M.2 SSD. Think about that a year ago. It's like half the price it used to be. It's fantastic. I love it. And lastly, to power everything, the original plan was an SFX power supply, but again, I ordered that, and the same day that I ordered the Atari 2600, thinking, yeah, I mean, I've dealt with SFX power supplies before. They're small. Surely there'll be enough room. No, there wasn't enough room. Not even close to enough room. So what I wound up doing was getting a 1-unit server power supply. Which is sort of a long and thin thing that's designed for rack mount servers, as I mentioned before. 350 watts, which is more than I need for this kind of situation. I've always, with power supplies, wanted more than what I need, because one of the good things about power supplies is if you oversupply, they run more efficiently. If you run them at about 70 to 80%, most power supplies, they run at the most efficient. Also, if you don't use the entire capacity of a power supply, they run cooler, or they tend to run cooler as well. So it's always, I always over provision for power. I just like doing that. It's always better to have too much power than not enough. But frankly, with the Ryzen 3, and if you're not using an external graphics card with it, you could probably get away with 150, 180 watt power supply really easily. But with the 1U server power supplies, it is just perfect as far as the sort of vertical height you've got and the width you've got there. It's a little bit longer than I wanted it to be, which means I had to cut out the entire back panel of the Atari 2600 there, which I didn't want to do because a lot of that is structural. So I had to go for another method to actually secure the back of the Atari on, because I got rid of all the structural support where the screws go. But it's probably better that I cut out the entire back anyway, just for the sake of having somewhere to suck air through nice and efficiently. But with that said, all put together, from the front, from the sides, from any angle from the back, it looks basically mint. I mean, if you are as familiar with Atari 2600 as I am, having spent the first 13 years of my life playing one or something like that, you'll instantly see, well, there's something wrong with the cartridge port. The cartridge thing is gone. I left that blank. I put a little bit of dust filter material that I took off another case, just cut it out of the dust filter on the case I'm not using at the moment, just to give it another area to pull air through, and also because it's at the top, maybe a little bit convection will help push some air out of it as well. I also had to drill a bunch of holes, and I really wish I'd measured these. I just did it by eye, and they're all lopsided and stuff, but you can't really see them because I drilled them into the slots basically of the Vader's sort of top panel, which is sort of ridgy anyway. So I drilled through the slots just above where the CPU cooler is. And yeah, if you look for them, I'm embarrassed because, like I said, I should have measured. I should have measured and make them regular. But you can't see them from any other angle but from directly on top anyway, so I'll live with it. And they don't seem that significant, just a bunch of little drill holes. But if you hover your hand over the top panel, you can actually feel the hot air being pushed up through there from the CPU cooler. So they are doing their job at least a bit, which is helpful. Every bit helps. Around the back, of course, you give the whole thing away. And like I talked about before, I left it open for the sake of airflow. Now, on the matter of cooling and airflow, it's not what you'd call quiet. I mean, it's not noisy, but even at idle, because it's only got two fans, like one on the power supply and one on the actual CPU itself. I'm thinking about getting some little 40mm fans. Noctua make a couple of nice ones actually, and put them in the cartridge slot just to force some air through it and things like that. But for the moment, it seems to be going okay. But yeah, the noise of that Thermaltake cooler, it's a low whine. It's pretty annoying when everything's quiet and it's just sitting idle or whatnot. You can just hear it. It's like that. It feels like a computer from 20 years ago. They always had that background hum with them. That said, during gaming, when you're actually playing a game, whether you're just using speakers or the TV speakers or headphones or whatever, you can't hear it. The game noise completely covers it. It's not loud. It's just kind of an ugly noise. Know what I mean? And performance-wise, as you've been seeing for yourself about some gameplay I've been cutting in while I waffle on here about the technical and physical nitty-gritties of it, it's actually really good. It easily handles at least 3 decades worth of retro gaming, which is exactly what I was aiming for. I wanted this to be a monument to my own personal gaming history, and for that reason, I've set it up with only systems that I personally played, either I owned or I played very often, like at a friend's place or something, and only games that sort of I have strong memories about. The easy ones to run, of course, run through the range of the Atari 2600, the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Sega Master System, the early days of DOS-based PC gaming. Oh, that was a Wild West situation there. Remember IRQ conflicts and manually setting up your sound card? It's just, and EGA versus VGA versus CGA versus Super VGA. The Super Nintendo. The Atari Lynx. Yes, I had an Atari Lynx. That's the choice I made back in those days. Oh, should I get a Game Boy? Oh, it's tiny. It's black and white. Oh, look at the little dot matrix screen. Or should I get an Atari Lynx? Look at this beastie, powerful thing. It eats batteries in about 34 minutes flat. But look at that great big screen, and it's bright and it's colourful. And then almost no games came out for it because Atari just didn't have the money to get the licenses for good games, so it kind of drowned in its own misery, much like a lot of other Atari consoles of that age. The Jaguar, for example. Wonderfully powerful thing, but there's no games worth playing. Hands up in the down below area, who remembers the Atari Jaguar? The Game Boy, of course, the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, the Sega Mega Drive, who North Americans will only know as the Genesis, which is a much worse name in my opinion. Most of the rest of the world knew it as the Mega Drive, which sounds far cooler than Genesis. No biblical connotations for a start. The Nintendo 64, the PC Engine, who some of you may know better as the TurboGrafx 16. What do you like better out of those names? PC Engine. Had nothing to do with PCs, really. Or TurboGrafx 16. One of them sounds very juvenile, one of them sounds very serious. Neither of them sound very good, but they had some great games on them. Bonk, for example. Greatest mascot name ever, by the way. Bonk. You know why they called him Bonk? Because he hit things with his head and it went bonk. The Neogeo, which I never owned, but I played a lot of Neogeo in the arcades, and the home version of the console was basically the arcade hardware, but with very, very, very expensive cartridges. Oh, always wanted one, never had one. And of course we rock up closer and closer to the modern age of gaming with the Nintendo DS, the GameCube, and the PlayStation. And more of you will find more and more of these names familiar as we go, won't you? But that was the plan. But the thing is, it handled all of that perfectly. Like, everything I threw at it, it was running at a perfect 30 or a perfect 60, whatever was appropriate for the machine and console at the time, things like that. So I decided to see how far this AMD Ryzen, this humble Ryzen 3 2200G with a Vega 8 graphics chipset slammed on the die there with the CPU and everything, how far could it go? Didn't play much PS2 when that was about. I was more a GameCube guy. You can have that argument in the chat too. Well, the comment section. Sorry, I'm in Twitch mode. But I was a big fan of the Soul Calibur games, so I installed a PS2 emulator, and I got Soul Calibur 3 and gave that a whack, and guess what? It ran perfectly. Rock solid 60 frames per second, glorious smooth gaming, classic Soul Calibur. Loved it. Surprised that the Ryzen 3 2200G could push a PS2 emulation around without any worries at all. Didn't have to do any fiddling, no tweaks. I nearly said twerks. I don't twerk, unless I'm really drunk. I didn't bother testing any Wii games at all, because, quite frankly, I still have my Wii, so if I wanted to play with my Wii, I would get out my Wii and play with my Wii. The Wii U, though, even though I do still also have my Wii U, I figured that was worth testing, because that's another leap forward again. But I did figure the Wii U would be the wall I smacked into as far as performance goes. I have seen some examples of certain Wii U games working pretty good on the 2200G, but there are some specifics with my build, and we'll get to that after we talk about this, but specifics with my build that I thought it's probably going to be a bit rocky, and I decided to test Breath of the Wild on it as well, because that is one of the most difficult of the Wii U games to run. There's been a lot of effort put into the emulation scene getting this thing to run properly. But no matter what I did, what options I changed, which mods and resolutions and graphics options or post-processing I turned on or off, I could not get it playable. Best I did was kind of 15 to maybe 25 frames per second with huge lag spikes all over the place. Not what you'd call playable even by a long shot. But like I said before, I already own a Nintendo Switch, so who cares? Breath of the Wild already runs and looks better on that thing than it ever did on the Wii U, even natively. But everything else, everything I wanted from the birth of gaming in the late 1970s, all the way through the early to mid 2000s, the 3 decades of gaming, it all runs perfectly, so I can play all my old favorites, all the nuggets of history and passion and love and late nights and groups of friends and all that beautiful gaming history and memories and joy and still extremely good games sitting there in an Atari 2600. The birth of my gaming history. It's where I fell in love with gaming. It's where I found passion for gaming. It's where I decided I would rather be gaming than being outside playing cricket very poorly, or chasings, or hide and seek, or literally anything else. Gaming is where I found my escape. It's my hobby. It was my passion. It was what I talked to my friends about. When it comes to the somewhat asthmatic ventilation this thing has, it does cause a couple of issues. Nothing that actually harms what I wanted it to do, but it's worth pointing out. Under most conditions, the package and the core temperatures stay well within safe. 60 to the mid-70s pretty easily. Frequency was sitting around 3 gigahertz. It should have been around 3.5, so it was throttling a little bit. But it sat at that 3 gigahertz pretty consistently. There was only a couple of times, couple of games, a couple of specific situations where it would throttle back down further because it was just, it could not get rid of the heat fast enough to stay at the high frequencies. And even then, it only went down to about 2.5, 2.4 gigahertz at the absolute worst. And that was on games like Tekken 3 on the PlayStation 2. I mean, it still ran perfectly. Nailed to 60 frames per second, but it was throttling all 4 CPU cores down to that sort of 2.5-ish gigahertz range. So, like I said, it's worth noting because it's just a consequence of how I built this thing and the sacrifices and compromises I had to make to get this thing in an Atari 2600 and make it look, like it's fresh off the shelf. I could have put a bigger vent here. I could have used a CPU cooler that stuck out the top or something like that. I could have put it in a regular case, for crying out loud. So it's just worth pointing out that it will throttle, but it doesn't hurt the experience. You can, of course, forget about reaching the 3.7 gigahertz turbo frequency with which the CPU should be reaching under ideal conditions, and forget about overclocking it altogether. Of course, that is absolute lunacy to even consider overclocking this thing. Although the performance I got out of this thing already does make me want to build a copy of this in a proper case, in a really well ventilated case with extra case fans and everything, and liquid cool it or something, a custom liquid cooling solution, just to see how far I could push the Ryzen 3 2200G, how far I could overclock it, what could I make it do, because it shocked me about how it just does stuff I didn't expect it to do. It's way more capable than I ever gave it credit for $100 CPU GPU combination. I just want to go ham on a cooling solution in another dedicated unit just to see what happens. But as I keep coming back to, even in its toasty retro home, even though it's desperate for air, even though it's throttling down, it is still more than enough to run everything I wanted it to run, and that makes me very, very happy indeed. I finally have my Atari 26 million, or my Blunty 2600, or I've got it, my SUPA-TARI 2600. I'm still working on the name. If you've got any suggestions for a good name for this thing, you know where to put them in the down below. Atari 26 million or SUPA-TARI 2600. I think Blunty 2600 is a bit on the nose. Meanwhile, if you're wondering about the 2200G in more modern PC native gaming, I've done some of that testing as well, and even there it surprised me. It will run Tomb Raider, like the original, the reboot Tomb Raider. I haven't tried the sequels because I basically ran out of space to install stuff, installing these big... I tried GTA. GTA's an 80 gigabyte game now. It's ridiculous. Remember that was 60 gigabytes? Where'd the other 20 gigabytes come from? Anyway, it runs Tomb Raider, 60 frames per second, 1080p, well, up to 45 to 60 frames per second, which is perfectly playable for that game. That's what I target in any benchmark I'm running for that game. 1080p, normal settings. Easy peasy. It looks great, plays great, lovely. GTA, 1080p, normal settings, 45-ish FPS again, reaching up and down a little bit either side of that, but generally around about 45, which again for that game is particularly playable. Love it. If you wanted to go to 60 frames, if you drop it to 720p at normal settings, it'll go 120 frames a second. Tested that as well. Don't like playing it at 720p though. It's hard to go back that far, unless you're native retro games. Even then, I did try some of the GameCube games, up-resing those 2 times, 4 times resolution. They worked perfectly well as well, playing Pokemon Colosseum and Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness at 2 and 4 times native resolution to make them all look smooth and slick, and it just looks amazing. Even that, no problem. And of course, if you're talking about the retro-inspired modern PC gaming, like Into the Gungeon I tried, works perfectly well, as you'd expect it would. So even if you're playing modern retro-inspired games, this thing will do it on its ear as well. And you can get into a little bit of AAA PC gaming as well, if you like. And for a PC build that costs about $400, I mean, what more do you want from life? Seriously. But there you go. That's the story of my Atari 26 million. I'm starting to like that name more and more. I've got to be honest with you. The more I say it, the more I like it. So if you have any other questions about this build, about retro gaming, about the AMD 2200G, if there's something else you want me to test or compare or anything like that, pop it in the down below area. There might be another few videos in this thing still. But thank you for watching. I am Blunty, and we'll catch you later. And now I'm going to open the window because it is summer in Sydney right now. I'd have to close the window for the sake of the audio here, and you might have noticed I'm getting sweatier and sweatier and sweatier throughout this entire video. Deeply uncomfortable right now. Probably got bit stains. Not going to lift my arms up to show you, though. That's a classy ending, Blunty. End on class, that's what I was saying. Bums!